Hello everyone and welcome to the second SVG Europe Sound Talks event of 2021, all about intercom. I'm Paul Mack, I'm the audio editor at SVG Europe, and before we begin,
we have enough to go through a quick review.
Can you just all mute your audio unless you're speaking, please? That's the usual Zoom housekeeping stuff. Also, please remember during the session, please do post your questions in the chat facility. SVG Europe editor Heather McLean will be saving all of the questions that come in and we'll put them to our panel at the end. As we're in a Zoom meeting, it might be a great idea to switch to speaker view so you get the best perspective on the current speaker. As I said, this afternoon is all about intercom systems, and we've got a fantastic group of experts ready with sessions on emerging intercom technologies and evolving comms requirements. And after that, there'll be a live Q&A with those questions from during the session. The first thought leader's perspective will be from Martin Dyster, Telos Alliance. He'll be looking at intercom technologies. And after that, Roger Charlesworth will be chairing our Audio Insiders perspective. Just before that, we need to thank our title sponsor, Telos Alliance, registration sponsor, TSL Products. We definitely couldn't run these events without those guys. And before we get properly started, I'd like to introduce SVG Europe editor, Heather McLean, with a word about audio awards. Heather.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming again. Lots of you here, so that's great. I just wanted to tell you about the SVG Europe Sports TV Awards 2021. I wanted to do this at the beginning of the conversation, just in case some of you have to drop out sort of like later on in the evening. We have, for the first time this year, brought in the Outstanding Audio Innovation Award, specifically because our Sound Talks events and our audio groups have had generated so much interest, and you guys keep turning up time after time. So we must be doing something right. What we want from you guys is to think about entering the audio award. So in this category, SVG Europe is looking to recognise a sports production or broadcasting innovation in the field of sound that has, as part of a wider broadcast or channel service, online or app output, delivered a new way of experiencing or delivering sports television audio during 2020. So anytime from the 1st of January last year to the end of December. So we're looking for an audio-specific innovation that played a part in a sporting event, league, or match that took place during 2020, as made available as part of a broadcast or online service. So get your thinking caps on. The deadline has been extended until Monday, June the 14th. But between you and me, if you tell me you're definitely entering, I'll see if I can give you a couple more days. But please think about it. Enter. It's here for you. Okay, and thank you for that. I shall now hand over to Martin Dyster from Telos.
Hi, well, thanks, Heather, and thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the Telos Infinity VIP intercom system, how it came about, how the pandemic influenced its evolution, if you like, and also the way that the groundswell of requirement from the market led to us developing the product in record time and bringing it to everybody. So let me just share my screen now, and you should be seeing that okay. So Heather, if you just stick your thumbs up if that's there. Excellent. All right, so some of you may have seen me do one of these presentations before, and I promise you it's nowhere near as long as my norm. This should be short and relatively sweet. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is talk about the Telos Infinity product line, which we brought out, I guess, IBC 2017. We showed it for the first time, and we launched it for real NAB 2018, and it's something Telos wanted to get into. The reason I was brought on board was to produce this intercom system that's based around IP, and the reason I'm just going to dwell on this for a couple of minutes is because it's a precursor to what's gone afterwards with the VIP system, and understanding the architecture will help understand how VIP works. So Telos Infinity is a matrixless intercom system. That's what we set out to do, and it was to build a completely matrix-free system. Whereas, you know, all of you on this call familiar with intercom will know that historically intercom in broadcast particularly has been matrix based, and my history of intercom goes way back to Drake in the 80s and building analog intercom systems, and it was matrix based, and it remained that way for some time. But with Infinity, we decided we would break that model and come up with something different. And we managed to do that by creating this scalable and distributed model where all the devices carry a DSP core and have agile mixing capability that allows the product to create this distributed model that eschews, gets away with the matrix, and allows us to create an infinitely scalable intercom product. We wanted to create something with a simplified UI because the generation of people coming into our industry don't necessarily have the broadcast skills that we're us old guys are used to, and we wanted to build something that appeals to the sort of quote unquote IT generation. A resilient architecture, of course. If your comms doesn't work, then your show can completely fail. So comms is an absolute essential, one of the few things that you can't really make a TV production or broadcast production without. We wanted to use AS67 and SMPTE 2110-30 at the beginning of the development of the product. AS67 was just being ratified, and we hung our coat on that. With Telos being one of the founders of audio over IP, or in fact the founder of audio over IP, it was natural that we would follow along with the standards-based approach. And also to use native voice over IP connectivity for anything outside of the local area network to make integration with other with remote sites and stuff like that simple to do. And yes, with that technology having this multi-site capability. So as we did move towards VIP, a lot of what's gone before was important. And also, although Telos is not known as an intercom company, Telos Alliance does have thousands of devices installed around the world. A lot of them in the radio industry, mixing consoles, telephony, processing equipment and stuff like that, that is in use 24/7. So it's a heritage of technology that went into the intercom system. And the way that Infinity works is like this. So this diagram shows on the top line an Infinity device, a panel or a belt pack. And again, this diagram is really important because this architecture has been reused in the VIP system. And so all of these devices have on-board capability, and let's look at it individually. So a panel or a belt pack, of course, the first thing you need to do is get audio into it and out of it. So A to D and D to A converters, of course, to get mics and speakers in and out. Mix engines, agile DSP mix engines on board. So there's huge DSP in each of these devices that can scale accordingly to whatever audio is coming into them or going out of them. So it's like it's drawn there. It's a whole load of little mini mixers that could be one big amorphous mixing console kind of thing running in the intercom system, or many small ones depending on what they're doing. You know, I'm listening to 5-6 conferences at the same time. I'm 5 or 6 little mixers doing that. You know, that's the kind of way it works. And then a bunch of AS67 transmitter receivers, a fixed number, but equally turned on and off to handle the amount of traffic that's going into those mix engines. And then every device having an embedded web UI, which is super important to the VIP product line, and a physical UI on the hardware devices, buttons and knobs and stuff like that. And then built into the system is dashboard, Infinity dashboard, which scans the Ethernet, discovers devices, creates a database based on the devices it discovers and the streams it discovers, turns that information into a user interface that can be used to program the intercom system, but does not have to be running for the intercom system to function. And then connectivity to third-party audio over IP endpoints is native. We don't use any special interface cards that cost extra money. It's all done natively on using AES67 into the fabric and then into the Infinity devices, and then finally any Telos family endpoints. So that also contribute. So A to D converters for analog 4 wires and AES3 4 wires or stuff like that, or for telephony in and out. So keep that little diagram in mind when we go and talk about VIP, because it's important, because it's repeated. But anyway, we're here to talk about VIP and what spurred it on. And really, my calendar from March last year is a bit of a giveaway. So that's what March 2020 looked like for me. I came back from the States for the 3rd trip of the year on the 8th of March from San Francisco to London Heathrow. And then the rest of the time, my travel calendar looks somewhat like that, and has continued to look like that, apart from a trip to B&Q and Screwfix and the like. But that's basically what it's been like for 15 months or so. So not much has changed, and that's pretty much the same for a lot of people, apart from those of you in the broadcast industry that have got back out to site. But what the timeline in the development of remote production has looked like over the past few years leading up to this has been something like this. Remote production, or REMI, has been around a while, and I think the first time I ever saw it mentioned was about a decade ago, in relation to the Olympics, and the way our friends at NBC in the States had started to investigate doing REMI production into Connecticut, into the offices there. And the reasons behind it are well known. Reduce the staff at the venue, keep your crew at HQ, reduce your costs, etc., etc. And technology has now adapted very well to doing that kind of model. You know, whether it's intercom or whether it's mixing consoles or anything else in between, and also connectivity has kept up. But what happened in March was sports stopped globally. The Premier League stopped on March the 13th. That was the day that the Premier League announced that they were putting the brakes on football, and it didn't really ramp up again until June, which actually is remarkably quick. You know, when you think back to that period of time, it seemed like an age between games, and June the 17th was when sports without personnel, sorry, not without personnel, but without crowd started. But this was a whole different kind of remote production model. Again, reduced staff at the venue, but the remote production teams weren't necessarily HQ, because they weren't necessarily allowed in through the doors. And very quickly, everybody had scrambled to create these remote models that had people working from their garages and their kitchens and their bedrooms. So our technology had to adapt very, 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 very fast, and content providers started to look to virtual solutions for this kind of thing. And that's what happened. My phone started ringing immediately, because we had this expandable matrixless intercom system that can adapt to these workflows, but it wasn't quite enough. So what our customers were asking for, well, a scale and agile system, which Infinity is, but something could be easily deployable in multiple locations, that can integrate with hardware and software production, but in a different way, not taking hardware and try and reinstall it in somebody's home. That can be done, but it's not the ideal. And non-proprietary standards-based audio comes along with the territory anyway for the products and for our competitors' products. But a software as a service option, you know, we started to hear that come up a lot. We want something we can deploy as and when we need it. We want the flexibility to deploy it on a computer, on a mobile, or on a tablet, but also to be able to integrate it with our hardware solutions. So with our existing intercom, or with you know, if it's a software solution with a hardware controller of some sort. But if it's virtualized, we want it to work like a real intercom. So, you know, the concept behind this was writ large from very, very early on, and the kind of use cases that we were hearing about also varied. You know, there were 4 basic ones that I remembered and wrote down on this presentation. So the first one we call the hybrid model, which is basically where I believe for a lot of broadcasters we are now, which is this still a centralization back at headquarters, people still going back into now going back into the production facility, at the venue, of course, with reduced staff, but also with some operational staff working remotely as and when they're required to do so. So for the VIP product, that means a VIP cloud server on AWS, Google Cloud, the private cloud, usually working with a third-party intercom system, a third-party matrix-based comm system most of the time, connected out to the venue using Infinity Link, which is our Opus codec product. And remote venue communications could be using our own hardware, using the VIP, using third-party remote panels, or on a PC or a phone. So that was one of the models. Another model that we saw come up, not so much for content providers, but more for content delivery mechanisms, was a sort of multi-site model of multiple operational centers, headquarters, affiliates, etc., tied in with remote operations. And this model looks something like this, where multi-sites who may have different third-party comm systems that otherwise wouldn't necessarily play well together when connected remotely, feeding into a virtualized VIP cloud system, acting as an interface for these decentralized matrix-based comm systems, providing the ability to then remote out using VIP, which then becomes an extendable part of the other brand's comm systems, and also using Infinity hardware panels as and when they're needed for coordination between the brands. And this is one that's come up a surprising amount, actually, being able to pull together multiple vendor comm systems. Another version is again, we got asked for as people started to look more at other cloud production services, not just comms and audio, but everything else that goes behind that. So, you know, I'm talking about products from the likes of, I guess, brands like Simply Live or VizRT or Ross or Evets or Grass Valley Amp, you know, those kinds of things that are cloud-based, and a way to get comms into there, because comms in those kind of products has been not entirely forgotten, but not executed all that well. So VIP server running alongside those production services, integrated using our product's ability to connect using Opus in the cloud, or Unicast AS67, or even linear 24-bit PCM connectivity inside the cloud, is another model that allows that to happen, with users then using remote VIP intercom panels as part of their production system, and also hardware as it's required. And I've got some diagrams coming up when we get into the product a little bit more that'll help describe some of this stuff a bit more. And then on-prem versions where VIP is basically the host intercom system in a more simplified manner, with an on-prem server with Infinity hardware or third-party comms with connected via native audio over IP, and then extended out over the wide area network to any other subsystems that might exist. So, I mean, those are the kind of things we were asked for. You know, these were the models that we were trying to fulfill. And I've gone into quite a lot of detail about what the component parts there are. And as I go into the product, you'll understand what I mean a little bit more. So Infinity VIP is basically taking that technology that I explained right at the outset, and that working model of this distributed DSP, and reimagining it as a software platform, where each of those virtual panels, each individual panel is running on a server, not as a matrix, because we don't have one. You know, we haven't recreated a massive matrix as an engine. We're lucky in that respect, in that we didn't have to do that, but we did have to virtualize the panels. We had to virtualize the back-end stuff, the dashboard configuration and management software. It was you could virtualize it on a Windows VM, but you couldn't do it in Linux up until this point, and you can now. Virtualize the link Opus codec so that we have a connection means between the cloud and on-prem. So between those third-party cloud production systems to third-party other vendor intercom systems to other audio subsystems. All the back-end stuff that also goes with this, the licensing, make sure it's secure, encryption, which isn't on this slide, but it's included in the product. Uptime metrics to sort out issues with software as a service, so it can be a billable resource. And then devices accessed simply by something that everybody has, HTML5 browser. Instead of having to develop an app for this, make it simple. Send somebody a web link, a secure web link that's password protected that allows them to connect to the intercom, and then use audio that everybody can use, WebRTC, signalization, web audio, or Opus, something with variable bit rates for connectivity. So breaking it down a little bit further, VIP systems run using Docker technology, which you may be familiar with. So each individual panel runs in its own Docker container. Those panels on their own VLAN architecture on an on-prem server, on a cloud server, use AES-67 multicast infrastructure as they would if they were physical on a regular local area network. They use the same distributed DSP, which gets away from not having had that central part. Hybrid interconnections, as I said, is done using those methods, utilizing the virtualized link codec. And now we have an invitation server, which means that I can send somebody access to a VIP panel using a secure WebRTC based invitation that makes it with encryption, that makes it extremely secure, whether it's within your own private cloud or whether it's in public cloud. It's still a secure connection that would be very hard to expose. On-prem or cloud deployments in public or private, as I just said. And also we integrated for meeting that request that came very early on for hardware control, we integrated Stream Deck into it straight away. So a VIP panel, when you deploy it on a phone, a tablet, or on a computer, looks like that. There's a couple of the 16 panel versions that can be squeezed around to fit your desktop, to fit your tablet, and also a VIP server is the shiny box in the corner. Stream Deck deployment looks like that. That's actually a picture of my desk here at home with my son as a stunt double, using it in anger on a production. But it means you can have that tactile interface with a hardware device, even if you're using a virtual software panel, even if you're using it on your phone. If you've got your phone's speaker and mic open on the desk, you can still use a hardware controller. You don't have to use the touch, because that can address the instance of the panel. And then the invitation mechanism looks like this. So you can send somebody an invitation to connect to a panel. It uses the Opus variable bitrate codec, SHA-256 encryption by default, and allows administrators to block, delete, or edit people's connections. You can stack multiple users on a timed basis. And what happens is the user gets an email that looks like the email on the left-hand side of this page with a password. They enter the password in, usually correctly. On that slide, it shows what happens when it's incorrect. When it's correctly entered, it pops open a panel. Your browser usually asks if you want to allow the panel to take hold of your microphone and speaker, and if you say yes, you have an intercom panel in front of you instantly that can be connected to whatever you want. So here's the last couple of things are a couple of deployment diagrams. So here's what an on-premise deployment might look like. So in the bottom left, in that sort of faint grey box, is a broadcast HQ, very simplified, with an on-prem VIP server deployed. It's our own appliance server I've shown, but that could be deployed on a customer's own bare metal server. connected using native audio over IP to their audio subsystems, and we've now done many interop and proof of concept tests with other intercom platforms, with other mixing consoles. It's the whole point of audio over IP is interoperability. And then Link is the connectivity medium that gets out to the cloud production services if they exist in this instance, and then to Infinity hardware users, and then of course a direct connection to the server for those people using software panels on whatever medium they may be. And then the cloud deployment version is not dissimilar to this at all, except that the VIP server is deployed on a pick your cloud provider, AWS, Google, Microsoft, whoever. Somebody even mentioned using Alibaba cloud services the other day to me. And then that's where native interconnectivity between it and the cloud production service can exist using our variety of codecs. NDI is on the way, incidentally, if people are wondering about that. That's a work in progress at the moment, which will be here with us soon. And then connectivity to HQ using Infinity Link, virtual from the cloud to a physical device at HQ, and then connectivity to virtual panels and hardware extended to hardware panels if that's what the user needs. So that's my quick whistle stop tour around VIP. So thank you for listening, and I'm sure we'll get into this sort of stuff a little bit deeper in the next hour or so. So anyway, that's me done, and now over to Roger. Cheers.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Martin. That's really great, really interesting. A lot of work there. Was this something that you started because of the pandemic, or you must have really been working on the cloud aspects of Infinity for a while?
No, I think the funny thing here is that when we started the Infinity project back in late 2014 in the offices in Cleveland, one of the things that we had to do was prove the architecture of what would become the hardware system. So the software guys created VMs of the hardware products before we had any boards. So before we had the ability to build hardware,
We were running it as VMs anyway.
They ran it as VMs. The difference at that point was there was no audio changing hands. You know, we weren't sending packets. We were just setting up the RTP. We were setting up the headers. Essentially, we were setting up the architecture so that when the pandemic hit and it became a reality that the market wanted this, we sort of dusted down what we'd done. Worked out ironed out the bugs with the audio side of it, and created the proof of concept. And I am oversimplifying it. The software guys are geniuses, they do all the hard work. But dusted it off and turned it into reality. And we had the first proof of concepts running really quickly. It's all the back end stuff that's taken the time, and also learning about what customers need in terms of security and how closed their systems need to be.
Yeah,
not for everybody, but so to answer your question, it was a happy accident in a way. We always wanted to do it, but this really lit a fire underneath.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, I think we've seen such dramatic changes in how production is done and what production infrastructure looks like. And I guess I'd like to just kind of challenge some of our contributors. It feels like, Craig, I'll start with you. I guess it feels like that a lot of the changes that we've made because of the pandemic have sort of become permanent. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, as we spoke prior to the session commencing, I think the pandemic's just accelerated what we call remote production in the UK. So it was something that everyone spoke about, not fearfully, but certainly was a lot of trepidation about, will this reduce the head count of engineers on site? Well, we were looking at reduced numbers of people and our staff, but as well as the technology advances, and it's actually just created more requirement for resources as far as people are concerned, certainly in our experience of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of, Emma, you're nodding your head, for the audio operator in the truck, that's the workload is really changed. This move away from the venue means the person who's stuck at the venue suddenly is doing a whole lot more, your colleagues on the venue end. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I think I've mentioned on these panels before, and it's funny, Craig says that a lot of people worried we'd sort of lose staff. I think in audio we've almost doubled. You now need people on site and also people at the remote end as well in the studio. I mean, we had a discussion the other day about this, and we're saying how I think certainly from a sound supervisor point of view at Sky, we had supervisors who were so used to having a dedicated OB truck engineer who knew the infrastructure, knew the way everything worked really well, sat behind them. And suddenly everything coming in-house for us has meant people have had to multi-skill in a very different way to how they did before.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It's almost that in reverse on site sometimes. You're so used to having a supervisor there, all of a sudden you're being asked questions about things that you've never had to answer before because someone's made those decisions for you. So you're kind of going out, looking at where to put kit, where the best place for microphones is, and guiding the sound engineers on the floor to help them do their jobs when you've been very used to being able to get your head into the technology and focus on that side of things. And the supervisor normally kind of took that role on site. Yeah. Well, I think there's also been now, so you have the complexity of what's happening on site, but also you're sort of having more shared production. You have remote, in some cases, certainly we have them over here, is also even remote graphics people or other, other people who would normally be in the truck are now sort of spread out. So what are the ways that, I mean, we're kind of used to, we've architected intercoms traditionally to go in the plant, and then we've had solutions for tying the plant to the truck. But do we kind of need to change, or how do we sort of adapt the way that we're doing things? And I guess I'll kind of throw that out to Tim. We'll pick on you.
I think in these days, I mean, because even with a pandemic, I think you have to differentiate, because even on site, you still have working bubbles and whatever that are not really working together, and they are isolated from each other. And then also, of course, you have the remote productions where the whole broadcast infrastructure is placed somewhere else. I think the key challenge is in these days that you have a flexible solution and a modular solution that close the gap, or that close the distance in between the venues. And that is, how can I say that? That is because, for example, we have just multiple remote productions in these days now, where the remote production unit doesn't know what's happening on site and in the venues, and you need to reach the people at the right time. And I think even with remote productions, the importance of communication there is even more important in these days, because you don't know what's happening exactly on the other side. Maybe they are in a different time zone, talking different languages and whatever. And the intercom in these days needs to be as that flexible that it can cope with all these requests on site and keep it easy. That's, I think, the challenge in these days.
Yeah, well, Ian, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, I think with the pandemic, we kind of had to get remote production working with the equipment we had. So I think, we've got it working, but it is limited to older technologies, and like you say, probably hooking them together using trunking or whatever, rather than, so I think going forward now, we're looking at the scalability of it all, really, because I don't think we can support what all our clients are used to from what we've started off very small about a year ago. Now we're doing like, we've got like 11 different productions happening via our base here. and obviously it doesn't scale. The technology we've got don't scale, so we are looking to migrate a lot of stuff into the cloud where we get that resilience and scalability. So I think that's just something, but once again, it's all reliant in on sort of capex, spending money on the new technologies. So we're sort of narrowing them down really, and then that'd be the way I think we move forward with it from our point of view. Yeah.
Well, the cloud and the public internet seem like they're going to be part of our, even now in production. Obviously, we've used the cloud for a long time in master control and things like that, but it seems like they're going to be a part of our life going forward, reaching remote people. And that does sort of create some new problems, particularly around interoperability. Emma, what, you were talking about that when we were chatting the other day.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to pick up on Ian's point, at the moment, I mean, and as you said as well earlier, Roger, obviously in the studio, we've got a static system that we built for the studio, which can interface with some things outside, but not tons. And we're interfacing now with so many different other comm systems, all kind of sort of strung together. It's a complicated signal flow. There are added points of failure. And we've also now got people working off site, people like commentators and reporters who are going to be working from their homes, need a system they can set up simply in a straightforward way. And cloud intercom systems are definitely something that could provide that going forward, but it's how you get those comm systems to talk not only into legacy, but into other cloud kits as well. And at the minute, it certainly seems like there needs to be a discussion between manufacturers about different protocols talking to each other and how sort of these old legacy systems and other cloud products can all talk to one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you hit on something, and Dan and everybody, I think we go through this too, is like incredible amount of manual setup, and particularly when we have different intercom systems that we're tie lining together, then we're doing a lot of setup. And it's not that it doesn't work once you get it set up, but you may be starting from scratch. Thoughts on that? Yeah, Dan, are you muted?
Yeah. So I would agree with building intercoms. There's a lot of work that goes into them, and this interoperability idea. For example, on the Formula E, they moved to quite a significant remote production model over lockdown, but we've got a telex system out flying around with that. But our Ealing broadcast centres all Riedel. And then they threw in some graphics operators who are in Barcelona, and with the joys of Brexit, getting some hardware panels to them was impossible. So we kind of ended up with 3 different solutions to tie together one production. And then someone decided to throw Unity into the mix, and we just started to have a bit of fun with finding out who's talking on what 4 wires coming from where, and how it was all going to tie together. And I think if you were to look at then to move that into the cloud, and you had one centralized area, because you can't, it's hard now to decide where's the hub. Is the hub on the site? Is the hub in the broadcast center? And if you put it in the cloud, that brings it a lot closer to everyone, as opposed to having one central bit that everyone else has to link into.
Yeah, it's a point that everybody's made too, is like when we think about time, the place that's closest to all the endpoints is the middle of the cloud, so it's not sending it to the cloud and then pulling it back down.
I think the
what
key
about
I was going to say the key to doing a lot of that is, especially for distributed events like that, is when the technology can allow you to have cloud deployments in multiple cities, but have them intelligent enough to trunk between them.
Right.
So that's I can see particularly where that's our future. Certainly now that we've got a product that can do what it can do, is to be able to satisfy that model as well.
Well, and there are going to be some cases when we look at sort of master control workflows and stuff too, where for some of these things like here, the regional sports networks, that some of those are being completely virtualized. So there isn't a broadcast center to tie everything back to. It only can live in the cloud. But what about the interoperability issue from your perspective? And Martin, you guys have used a lot of standards like Opus and AES 67. You're deploying NDI. Where do you see the interoperability issue?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, my background systems integration, and I've worked on projects before where we'd had two intercom brands, and we'd figured out ways to integrate them with other products. And for us, it always used to, when I was at TSL, it always used to come down to using products like TSL Tallyman as an API, as a means to knit the APIs together so that you can make them talk to one another. You could translate between APIs, and I think the answer might be to look to third parties, unless us from the intercom community, from the manufacturing community, can get together and agree to allow participation between our companies. And I'm not sure that that's ever really met with much acceptance, between us in the past, which is why a third party control orchestration layer in the middle is probably the easiest way to do it.
Would you, I mean, put you on the spot, would you publish the protocols that allowed your intercom to be interoperable with someone else? Is that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's no, I came into the company saying that all along, particularly with my background, that it would be something that we should do, allow, have a publicly available API. Somebody will probably send me a message from Telos HQ in a minute, say, what are you saying? But that's the way I view it. I mean, maybe not just stick it on the website. I think we'd probably protect it to an extent to make sure that we know who's using it and why. But I have no particular issues. I don't want to charge 20 grand for it or something, because I don't think that's the way. I mean, if you look at, again, I mean, I mentioned TSL Tallyman, but you look at products like VSM or Cerebrum, or they rely on interoperability and the ability to get hold of APIs and to be able to or protocols and to be able to create translation between them, and I don't see any reason why anyone would be protective about that.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're the disruptor here, though.
Trying to be, yeah.
Ian, when you were talking about this earlier, but is this interoperability issue? Is this something that is important, and how do you see this?
Well, I think, yeah, once again, doing these remote productions, everyone starts off like they're very appreciative it's all working, but as they settle into it, they want exactly what they had before, and that's where the scalability comes in. And at the moment, say like with Sky, you interact with 4 wires, so when you get 10 different people that want to speak to 12 different people, it doesn't scale very well. So that's where I think if we could interop via even some third party, that would mean we could access each other's talkback frames and stuff. So I think I think at the moment the scalability doesn't work the way we're doing it, not for future sort of productions. I think it's very much a short-term fix, I think, to a longer-term problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's hard to believe that after watching the Worldwide Developers Conference the other day and just looking at the technology that we use for communications right now, it feels like our intercom technology is some of the things we're using, like 4-wire, just like it's unbelievable that we still have to use 4-wire. So, what about the cloud? I guess I've heard everybody say that that's kind of an important component. What are the survivability, availability issues associated with the cloud? Is that, Martin, in the stuff that you're working on, is that well understood?
It's new. We're learning a lot very rapidly.
Yeah.
You know, I see all the email traffic going backwards and forwards between the developers and stuff like that, and the technology that the space that we're working in is something that's new to all of us.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think in computer networking, that availability, redundancy, stuff like that is something that can be engineered in, and maybe in the media we're just learning.
Yeah,
learning to make it.
you know, there are. I've heard the comment made before by some saying that if you deploy an AWS, then AWS takes care of the redundancy situation, but I don't believe that's entirely true, not in the way that we need it to be within our industry. And I think it's incumbent upon us as manufacturers to investigate more deeply into those solutions and find out what they are, because at the moment it's not necessarily very easy to do. You know, if you deployed an on-prem server for a virtual product, then you almost got to have a hot spare in the rack and then plug it out if anything goes wrong. You know, there's nothing easy about doing any of this, and it gets even harder once you start to look at doing it in the cloud.
Well, I mean, but it's one reason we virtualize servers, is so that the load can be shifted when one server goes out. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about when
you know, if you take something like VIP, it's how does the connected comms panel that you're using on your phone suddenly address a different server when it flips over? You know, can all that follow seamlessly? And it's still a work in progress as far as we're concerned.
Yeah. To you guys, I've been meaning to ask you, and Dan, you kind of mentioned it, but are all you guys using Unity for something? Does this come up in everybody's? Craig, you're shaking you're nodding your head.
Yeah, we use it for a variety of monitoring signals into our traditional intercom. So it's a lot of obviously the benefit of low latency, program monitoring, pre-hears, yeah, just a whole host of things.
So you use Unity Connect as well as Unity, yeah, Intercom. Ian, yeah, comes up.
Yeah, we've tried various things, and actually, yeah, Unity's been probably one of the most reliable, even though it's actually one of the most cost-effective solutions. Really, it's a very well utilized, both the talkback and like Craig. We've used it for the extra circuits for all the stuff that people have forgotten to ask us about, so we can quickly send signals between places. So no, Unity is definitely one part of the puzzle.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they ever kind of planned Ian to be in that, you know, in that business. And you're kind of saying, as much as for monitoring, as much as anything, or even bringing signals, microphones, remote announcers, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Opus codec, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the really? I mean, we talk about the reliability, but the reliability issue is probably really about the public internet connection on the remote.
Yeah, I'd say I'd say the technology for us it's quite reliable and proven. It's always been the network, the connectivity back to wherever you're going, and that's still the weak link, I think.
And,
so,
and do you have solutions to that? Do you employ cell modems as backups, or Cisco?
Yeah, well,
go ahead.
Yeah, where we, I mean, especially on the hybrid sort of the hybrid remotes, we've got like disaster recovery, so they maybe don't go over the same pipe as the main connectivity. So it's like going over the internet or like via VPN or something like that. So, but a lot of it, once again, if you're at someone's house, they only really have one internet, don't they? So you're on that, and when that's the problem we have at the moment. When that goes down, it's an audio problem, when really it's not an audio problem. It's more of a, well, it's an internet problem. But obviously, once again, you're managing their expectations on stuff that we've got no control over, really. So that's just another thing, especially for home users and remote commentators who are working from different countries and stuff. So
well, then are you using, or your clients using, then remote redundant internet connections? Or
a lot of time, no, they just rely on the internet, on the one that, obviously, if it's something we've installed to do remote production, we would allow for a reduced sort of bandwidth pipe going a diverse route. But when you're at someone's house, we just have to rely on that, especially like Craig said, with Brexit and stuff. We're just literally sending either hardware or software. We're offering software solutions to clients who are in Europe and relying on whatever they've got available at the time.
couldn't come at a less convenient time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been very difficult with carneting every bit of kit. So that's where the software thing again comes into it. People, sending kit out isn't as easy as it used to be. So we have to work on the other solutions. And like I say, majority of the time they're very, very reliable. But when it fails, it's the internet that's failed or the connection that's failed. So.
Emma, you guys are dealing with remote. You're dealing with remote talent on a fair. Is that something that's sort of ongoing, or what's your, as an observer, what's your sense about where this is going? Is this going to continue to be a part of bringing in a?
Definitely, yeah. No, I think it will be. I mean, it's a funny one because we've definitely got a lot of sports commentators or talent who are really pushing to be back on site, and the only thing that's keeping them away is COVID. So sort of as soon as measures begin to lift, a lot of those people would rather be in the stadium where things are happening, and sort of things start to sort of revert back to normal, as it were, sort of as we would have produced maybe previously. But then again, being able to have people at home opens up a lot of other options. People don't have to travel, they can work if they can stay at home. But again, as exactly as Ian was saying, you do kind of sacrifice things like diverse paths and your redundancy a lot of the time for relying on someone's home internet connection.
Yeah. Well, what some people, what like ESPN has done here is sort of, in a lot of cases, they've added a business class internet connection at the talent's home, and they've, deployed a router with a redundant connection, cell modem or whatever, or connecting to two business class. Often it's through one vendor. Sure. Dan, are you seeing that too?
Yeah, we've gone through a whole load of different things to try and bring redundancy into the home, but you always seem to have some payoff that doesn't quite weigh up. So with the bonded 4G stuff, you're increasing all the latency, and then just trying to get a diverse internet path into someone's house for a one-off show isn't really an option. But if the whole show's riding on their single internet connection, is it really worth the risk? It's moving it into the world of production and where they want to put the money and weigh up what the costs are if that person's internet connection doesn't work. We've had cases where the whole show's riding on one person, and if that person falls offline, then we might as well turn everything off and go home.
Well, one thing, and you mentioned, 4G. I mean, one thing that we've talked about a lot lately is the impact of 5G, and as that starts to be deployed, Craig, Ian, is that something that you guys see as being?
Roger, could you repeat the question, please? I was reading
5G.
Reading a question. Sorry.
I trailed off. 5G. We've talked about 5G. Is that kind of? Do we see that as sort of being a part of a factor here in terms of going forward, that if we're doing this, we'll leverage the lower latency and whatnot of 5G in order to do some of the stuff?
We've only had very limited experience of that with BT using 5G to send. I mean, not to throw a question at one of our competitors, but Dan may be better equipped to answer this, because I know that Timeline have done a remote production exclusively on a 5G network, Dan?
Yeah, a lot of our, I'm not sure if it was exclusively on 5G, but a lot of the Women's Super League coverage was done solely on phone connectivity using 4G, bonded 4G systems. And that was the whole show: cameras, microphones, comms, the works, and no vehicles on site. You could probably send everyone there on the tube if you wanted to. And it's worked incredibly well over lockdown, but when those stadiums start filling up with people and you're trying to bring 5 cameras back along with all the people there, then that's where we need to start looking at if these 5G options are going to offer us uncontested connections, and if the communications providers are going to open up that bandwidth for people to hire out, and how complicated that will be to organize.
Well, somebody like BT is on both sides of that. They're trying to have these great in-stadium experiences, and at the same time, another end of the company is bragging about being able to have wireless cameras and stuff like that. And I suppose if that's provisioned properly and it can all work, but it seems likely that at least some events are going to get covered just with 5G, and maybe not Premier League, but some other stuff. Well, any last thoughts? Anybody? This has been interesting. Do we have questions? I'm sorry, I rambled on, Heather.
It was actually a question I had for Martin, if it's all right. Something I'm interested in with moving the workflows into the cloud is, at the moment, we're used to, when you've got the people based on site or at the hub, if a popular thing is for the production team to have hot mics of each other on all their panels so they can all hear each other, certainly at the moment where they're distanced. If that's all working back to the cloud, is there going to be an issue with audio latency, do you think? And will it be able to move quick enough for people to not be irritated by that?
Well, it doesn't introduce any additional latency, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Somebody remote on the internet, they're remote on the internet, and
there's no latency caused. Certainly with VIP, there's no processing latency caused by the device where the intercom panel is. Nothing appreciable, and the panel itself, the back end of the panel itself, is in the cloud. In fact, all the panels themselves are in the same place. They're all in the same server, wherever that server may be. So that it's rather delay rather than latency, because you're talking about transport over distance of the signal from the phone or from the computer. I mean, the only thing I can really say is we got to try it. See how that looks and feels. And the VIP system allows you to put a hot mic, everybody else's hot mics, into a party line or onto a key directly. You can do all of that. It's all built in. Hot mics are available on the 4-wire list, actually, inside the system natively. So we can just try it for real. See if it works.
I think that was I'm just reading the questions. Heather, did you see anything else?
Yeah, we've got a few questions coming in. Colin Pearson has just said latency is always an issue for us. We even keep running purely analog radios because the modern hybrid ones still introduce around 10 to 14 milliseconds. Anything that adds delay is unwelcome. Any comments on that? Any of you guys use analog still?
Oh, I'd certainly agree with that. Whenever floor managers would be the example, Colin, that you hand a floor manager a digital radio and they'll give it back to you because they're put off by even that small amount of latency. So yeah, it's very much a salient point. Ken's also asked a question about automated failover, which is actually, I'm going to go away and speak to my colleagues, because we don't actually at the moment. We use an internet-based, in a rugby example, we use an internet-based system for our main talkback between the between the site and the HQ. But it has to be, it's reliant on somebody paying attention to that disappearing for the switchover to happen, so it's not automated in our example. So thanks for the question.
Cool. Stay on the subject of latency. I'm going to say campaign because it sounds like champagne without the H. So D campaign says, hello all, what sort of latency do we talk about when we work in the cloud? It's acceptable to have some latency with users at home, remote, of course. I guess at the moment, people are a bit more forgiving, viewers are more forgiving as well. But how does that work with IFBs and or people that are on site with each other, and a potential audio delay could be off-putting, which must be an issue. Can an AWS workflow be brought in line with more traditional setups in terms of audio delay?
Can I take that? I think one of the things that the cloud proponents have talked about a long time is if people are spread around and they all need to be as close to each other as possible. So they're going on public or private internet to get onto the wide area network nationally or internationally, then the closest place in time and in distance, which is one of the factors, right, is the speed of light. One of the closest places you can be is in the cloud. And if all your production is, for instance, using an AWS backbone, the quickest path, and it's going to be lightning quick. And in England or something, it's super fast. A little slower between California and New York, but the quickest way is going to be across one of those networks operated by the telcos or operated by AWS or Google or whoever. So it's a sort of a fallacy that going to the cloud slows things down. It's actually, things are faster in the cloud. Now, if you're going from the up and down from the cloud, if you're pulling something back to the broadcast center, it's actually slower. So the idea that being in the cloud is going to be slower is something that the people who are cloud proponents are always happy to point out just isn't true. So
cool.
Here we go.
We've managed to, with a cloud workflow in AWS, we've managed to get down to a 7 millisecond round trip latency using Opus as well. So that was being encoded and decoded and fully measured end to end.
And the biggest part of that, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, is the encoding delay.
Yeah, I'd imagine if it was sent PCM, that would have been even quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have a to D delay, but that's not, what it used to be back in the old days. But, that's using a compressed codec is probably the biggest delay. It's interesting.
Cool. Okay, and we're still on latency here. This is Paul Mack, our audio editor, has said, what are the practical or potential future options for interconnection and data signal sharing between cloud-based products, even between different manufacturers or providers? Who wants to kick that one off? I'm looking at Martin.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So this is the sort of work we've been doing with the intercom, where we've deployed it in the cloud and work with other vendors to try and make interconnectivity work. And we're not all in the same place. It's certainly one of the reasons why we're looking at doing an NDI integration, because there's a lot of cloud stuff. NDI in the cloud is reasonably mature, and it got asked for fairly early on. So there's not a lot of audio done well in the cloud. There is definitely not a plethora of audio mixing consoles out there in the cloud. And when we're talking about interfacing an intercom system with other cloud products, that's probably what we're looking to do. So, we know about people using post-production products or even home recording products like Reaper in the cloud. Telos have our own IQS console. And I know some of the other manufacturers of cloud production facilities have have audio mixers out there. Grass Valley Amp have just launched one, for example, and some of the brands have them. So whenever we talk to companies like that, we're all very open about things like using the Opus codec or using AS67. So we've certainly been successful with Opus because some of the other brands have implemented it. AS67 unicast in the cloud, because while it's on the same machine, there's no there are no issues with egress charges and stuff like that, so it keeps it relatively cheap. And then NDI is certainly something. So there are different options for doing it. You can't really have native multicast AES67 as an option because we might be running on the same platform, but we won't be running on the same machine, and you can't get PTP clock in those deployments at the moment, so you can't get AES67 multicast to run between devices. So yeah, it's a very dynamic situation at the moment that seems to be resolving itself as and when new devices and new technology emerges. But we're reacting as quick as we can to adapt to that and to be able to create these interoperable solutions so that the different audio subsystems can coexist.
Great. And another one from Paul is it more likely that entire workflows will be provided by a single service, I'm assuming, in the future? Because at the moment, you guys, it sounds like you're having to cobble together what you can grab and patch up. Or would you like?
Is that part of the solution that you're looking for long term, Ian, or anybody?
Well, probably not one vendor. I'd think more the interoperability, really, because we've got a lot of equipment, obviously, that we've purchased over many years that we still want to use, you know, in all kind of production. So I see it more of that sharing of the technology or something that can enable that to happen and still, you know, work within the proprietary sort of controls of, you know, each like, you know, a Telos or a Riedel or Unity. So I think that's more realistic than.
No, you muted yourself, Ian.
Can you hear me now?
That's more realistic, and then you hit mute.
Yeah. So yeah, like I say, I think no, not one vendor. It'd be the you know, sharing of the APIs that make it happen, to make you know, these systems talk to each other in a way that we can utilize, rather than, like you say, still using 4 wires, which is like a, you know, from the analog days, isn't it, really? But we've never really we still use them because they work. And I think that's the thing about talkback, it has to work all the time, doesn't it? So reliability and resilience is what we'd look for.
Well, and for those to be able to integrate more closely, I guess, is the thing that everybody's sort of talked about.
Exactly, yeah. Which is where I think there's a lot of you come up against the systems don't talk to each other, and I think that's obviously a deliberate thing, isn't it? It's proprietary. So how do they bridge that so that they can work in a more streamlined way and still you know, and still protects their own rights of development and stuff.
Heather, I love this. Colin's got great questions. I love this question about
great.
wireless on-site. How do we see that evolving? Because that seems like, you know, do we see that moving to app-based system, or what? You know, how do we integrate all this into the wireless side of it? What are you, Dan?
Well, when I first saw Unity and logged into it and it all started working, the first thing I thought of was the football focus at the FA Cup final, when they start at the tube station and go all the way through the dressing rooms and then out into the bowl, and covering that with radio talkback at Wembley is always a bit problematic. And then you think, would you actually ever want to put them on a phone where the 4G is going to drop out, or you're going to have to compete with the internal Wi-Fi networks? And that's when you start thinking about Bolero and all those sorts of things. But even with those depth frequencies, more and more people are using them. Even that spectrum is starting to become quite busy, and I don't think it's got to the point yet by far where it would be unreliable. But I don't think there's anything yet that will quite replace a GP340 in the hand of your floor manager when it really needs to work.
Yeah, I agree with Dan. I think it's very much a sort of needs must. Like, do you need to go wireless? And if you do need to go wireless, how reliable are the systems in place to support that at the moment?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if the camera that's covering that remote shot is 5G, and I mean, this is the sort of stuff we run into motorsports, right? We'll be using all of this sort of bleeding edge wireless stuff in motorcycle racing and things like that. So why can't the intercom? My phone works wirelessly often.
Cool. That's the end of our questions from the audience.
Well, this has been great, Heather.
It has. Thank you so much to all the speakers. You've been awesome. Unfortunately, we lost Tim from Riedel. His internet dropped out at home and he wasn't able to log back on.
Perfect.
Talking of internet. Although he did look like he was in his garden shed, so maybe it just didn't stretch that far down the road. Great. So on that note, thank you very much, everyone. I'll hand back over to Paul to say his final word.
Just to say thank you, everybody. Thank you to the speakers. Really interesting session. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. We do have to say big thank you also to our sponsors, Telos Alliance and TSL Products. It's fantastic. To say really just stay in touch with us. Make sure you give us and your news so that we can do interesting things with it and tell everybody what you're up to. Look out for the SVG mailer about the next events, and stay safe, all of you. Thank you very much.